Morning. Friday. Today is May 14th, and I hope everybody's having a good week. Today we're going to change things up and do something a little different. I have a frame in the shop that is client owned, and this particular frame was fabricated back when people were first starting to widen rear end with the wide back end. Not thinking too much, or actually not much options for bottom bracket shells. So there's a standard 2 3/4 inch bottom bracket shell with this frame with a 170 millimeter wide rear end. The client would like for me to narrow up the dropouts to 135, which is the hub he's using. And we're going to basically cut the rear end off, rework it, narrow up the dropouts. We're going to hand cut dropouts and redesign the stays a little bit. That's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and hit the shop and see what's happening at Peak Cycles. Little side project here between frames, and the client wants the rear end narrowed up. Dropout's currently set up for a wide hub at close to 170 millimeters. Interesting thing is the stays are already at 135, which is what we want the dropout spacing to be. So I'm going to rework this rear end. We'll cut new dropouts and give it a new look. Getting ready to cut a couple dropouts here, and I already had this piece of scrap in the shop, utilizing most of the material here. Drew my lines in, drew my curve in there. That's all you need, don't overthink it. Let's go ahead and cut it up and keep it moving. One down. One to go. This literally started out like this. Again, I'm using scrap around the shop. Don't throw away your scrap. You can use it at a later time. You never know if it's going to work out for you. You can see I already piloted the hole from when I did this one, so I know we're in the same spot. Let's go ahead and get the slot cut and keep it going. And we're all sized up on the frame jig. I'll get that bottom bracket fixture on there as soon as I get the rear end cut out here. And I am by no means pointing out anybody's work, but I wanted to show this to you because I'm going to have to correct it. We are skewed. This rear end you can see is veering to the left. After I cut it off, we'll get it straightened out, but I wanted to show it to you so you know what we're in for. One more thing before we cut this back end off is the dropouts I made. If you put them where they should be, don't reach the tube up here. And I did that on purpose because these tubes are actually running uphill compared to the bottom tube. So if I level it out, that'll drop this down right where we need it to be. Here she is, all hacked up. Gonna clean those miters up, toss those stays, get the center up on the jig, and start reworking it. Gonna jump in here real quick. I'm not sure if you noticed that when I cut the back end of that frame off, I was just doing straight chop cuts, just straight off before I moved on to actually cutting the miters in. And there's a reason for that. I personally don't care for these types of cuts, but sometimes you're in these situations, and what it is the back end of that frame is really heavy. And you want to do your best to either release the weight from that or counterbalance it somehow, whether you're using a bike stand or a vise or whatever. And here's what happens. As you are cutting through your stick, it's creating a gap. little small gap there. And the further you get into that cut, the weight of the frame, if you don't have that weight released, is squeezing that gap together. Just before you get to the end of the cut, there's nothing holding that from pinching that gap together. And then what happens? Bam! Grinder flies out of your hand, scares the crap out of you, and potentially, hopefully, no physical damage. Another reason for cutoff wheels flying out of people's hands is to stay behind the cut. Again, this is physics. When you approach your cut, you're coming in a downward position like this, and which is natural. You can get up over the top a little bit, but if you get in front of the cut, now what's happening? Your wheel is going this direction, which is in the upward position. What happens when you get in front of the cut? Bam! Grinder flies out of your hand. Scares the crap out of you, potentially, but hopefully, no physical damage. We all know the horror stories of cutoff wheels. Keep it safe. Let's keep it going. Seat stays in place. Mitered. Pretty straightforward, literally. Getting ready to cap them off. And then I've got something pretty cool idea for the chain stays. Seat stays tacked down, tapped. Onto the chain stays, I rolled this single stick here. We're gonna cut it in half so we have matching radiuses, and pretty much the idea is gonna be something like that. Can you see it? Can you see it? One side down, and I do have to admit it wasn't easy. Working with inconsistent miters here, being I just chopped them, I got them as close as I could. And in order for them to meet up nice and tight here and not have the stay sway in or out and come straight back was a challenge. Super happy with it though. On to the other side. Well, that certainly worked out much easier than I expected. Sometimes mirroring can be the biggest pain in the butt. Other times it just works out because you've done it once before. Super pleased with this. I'm gonna cut the ends off there, cap it, keep it moving. In for the home stretch. I can feel it, I can feel it. Basically these magnets, what they're doing is the ones on the outside is what's actually holding the stick up. The ones on the inside I've talked about in the past, and these are telling me that I'm flush with the dropout. I want the stays to be flush, and so that's basically what these are doing for me. They're also aiding and holding, but let's go ahead and get them capped off. Keep going. pretty happy with that. Sent a few photos to the client. He is very pleased also. Going to come pick it up tonight, and another happy ending. Back to the cutoff wheel, I wanted to talk about the fact that yes, I was cutting off a heavy end of a frame, but keep in mind this can happen in everyday circumstances. You can throw a 10-foot stick up on your vise and just make sure you've got the heavy end in the vise when you're cutting off the light end. You notice when I got that rear end cut off, I was able to work on the miters without that stress because now I'm just cutting off little pieces. As for the fabricator, I wasn't calling it out being skewed. I've had my share of skewed frames. I've spent days, sometimes weeks on a frame just to chop it up because it's skewed. But with that said, the particular fabricator of that frame is one of the best builders / fabricators out there today. One last thing, if you're enjoying these Peak Cycle YouTube videos, please hit subscribe. Greatly appreciated. That's pretty much going to wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed today's version of what's happening at Peak Cycles. And until next time, make it a killer day. Airplane. Again, this is physics. When you approach a cut, the disc is running in the downward position when you're behind the cut. If you get up on top, you can get up on top a little bit, but if you get up in front of your cut, what's happening now is the disc is running in the upward position. And what happens when you get in front of your cut? Bam!